Hello, my name is Tracy, and this is my podcast, Step Inside My Mind, or since this seems to be a reality expressed in acronyms, S.I.M.M, S-I-M-M. I want this podcast and any comments from fans or anyone simply passing through to be a safe space for survivors and whips. That's works in progress to you. I also want it to be as inclusive as possible. So keeping that in mind, ladles, giraffes, bathtubs, tangerines plus, and all hummingbirds within earshot of my voice, just in case no one told you today, fuck the storm. You are the storm. Housekeeping for this episode. Trigger warning. Statements of sexual abuse and domestic violence upcoming. Listener discretion is advised. I'm not really sure how content creators, YouTube, podcasts, whatever, I'm not really sure how you guys do this. It's daunting, frightening, and not a little bit frustrating. This almost didn't happen, this podcast. My computer, my 2012 MacBook Pro, yes, it's a dinosaur, but it decided to corrupt the first episode. I, in my wondrous negativity, thought the universe was trying to tell me not to embarrass myself. Nobody's gonna want to hear what you have to say, Tracy. Then I remembered Jake Remington's quote that I paraphrased in my intro. The actual quote goes, "Fate whispered to the warrior, 'You cannot withstand the storm.' The warrior whispered back, 'I am the storm.'" I'd always liked that quote. I keep it in my memory warehouse as an affirmation, a much needed one, much of the time. I didn't know who was responsible for that quote until I looked it up, found out it was this gentleman, Jake Remington. It came from a book that I can't remember the title of, but I wanted to, give the credit here because I'm not having him or his estate, if he's dead, coming after me, telling me, you owe me money that I'm not making yet, fingers crossed, and that's why I looked it up to see who it was. Yeah, I'm smart when I need to be, sometimes, a lot of the time. I also realized that it wasn't the podcast the universe didn't want me to produce. It was the actual first episode. I decided I was going to release it on Mother's Day, the birth of my last chance. Then the advice given me by a tarot reader once upon a time popped into my head. There's no such thing as the right time. It's time when it's time. I know it's not the most profound of thoughts, but it's succinct and to the point, and it's also an affirmation, or more specifically, a reminder not to procrastinate. And Tracy is the Queen, Lord Grand Poobah of procrastination. I say it's my last chance because I was given a voice that would have been counted among some of the world's most accomplished singers. I can say that with confidence. I was good. If I can either find an old recording of me singing something royalty free, because again, I don't have that kind of money, or make a recording of me singing something royalty free, I'll figure it out. Anyway, I took it for granted and started to smoke, and ultimately, I damaged my breathing, thereby limiting the range of my voice. I did that to me. Why? We'll get into that at some other point, but the point that I'm trying to make now is that some people are only given one chance, one gift, one talent, and if it's squandered, it's squandered. That's it. Game over. But I was lucky enough to be blessed with intelligence and creativity and imagination. That and a not so humble opinion on lots of things. Being a nerd and a geek, I read a lot, all kinds of subjects. I just like knowledge. My bucket list, this is just to show you how much of a nerd I am. My bucket list includes wanting to be on an archaeological and an anthropological dig at some point. Back when I was trying to figure out what else to do with my voice since I damaged it so badly, I also wanted to be a radio disc jockey. I'm hoping that you guys know what that is. DJs weren't always just these amazing people standing in the middle of this humongous crowd putting together sounds and music like a maestro. They were, I think, first people who played music on the radio and in between the music tried to amuse you while they decided what they wanted to play. It was banter. I'm not trying to be condescending or act like a know-it-all, but I have no idea what generation, Z, X, B, Alpha, whatever. I'll have no idea who's listening to this, obviously, until we start interacting with each other. And I can't just assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about, especially since one of the old feeling making things I learned recently was we're in a generation of kids that don't know what a rotary phone is or a pager. Yeah, makes you feel old, like I said. So every now and then I'll drop in these little tidbits of information just so we're all on the same page. Not going to apologize for it. But the reason I'd wanted to be a disc jockey, it was mostly because of Alison Steele, born Seal Lohman. The Nightbird on WNEW FM was a classic rock station. She was mystical. Her radio patter was as deep and as sexy as her voice, and her knowledge of progressive rock, poetry, and literature was unmatched at that time, in my humble opinion. She was also the first woman to win Billboard's FM Personality of the Year in 1976. I had written her a letter once, and she was kind enough to answer back. I can't remember a lot about what I asked her or talked about. I probably lamented to her what I just talked to you guys about, my voice and how I used to be a really good singer and that I wanted to be a radio disc jockey. And she thanked me for listening and hoped I was able to achieve my goals. She told me not to be so hard on myself, and she said that I shouldn't let anyone, not even me, stop me from doing what I wanted to do, what I love to do. All of these things that I'm saying, talking about me in a Reader's Digest condensed version kind of way for this first episode, I'm supposed to use my talents. Everybody is. You have talent, you have something that you're good at. You're supposed to use it wisely, and in my very humble opinion, use it to benefit your area of the world. The world's too big to think about, but your area of the world, you should make a dent, and in a positive way. I believe that we're all here to use our abilities, our talents, to do something good, something productive for our individual parts of the world. As a species, I think we've lost our way, and that's with a capital W, our purpose, collectively, and as individuals, because we see ourselves as unnatural, for lack of a better term. If we saw ourselves as natural, as a part of nature, capital N, many negative things that are happening to us wouldn't be. We'd protect the weak and innocent instead of using them when it's convenient and letting them suffer and die when they become inconvenient. My dent is sharing my story, my truth about the trauma I experienced at the hands of loved ones as a child. My struggle to love myself and not keep getting in my own way. My opinions about what I see, hear, and read, but mostly to get out of my own head. I live mostly in my head. It's safe in there most of the time. I'm an empath and an introvert who's also a Virgo. So my alone time is not just precious to me, it's a need. It's a need so I don't end up on the 6 o'clock news as the next crazy person who reaches their limit and does a top of the world, ma reenactment. If you know, you know. Also, I have a tendency to not want to interact with people, to stay inside my head. I also know that I don't want to exist like this forever and always, because I also enjoy interacting with certain people in small groups. I hope I'm able to, while working on my progress to become the best version of myself, I'm hoping that I'm able to perhaps help somebody who just listens to this, even if it's simply just a nudge to take a baby step on their road to their best selves. Sometimes that nudge takes the form of knowing they're not alone in that deep pit of dark emotions that are brought on by memories that still carry too much weight in our decision-making processes. I've wasted time and abilities for too long, mostly because I'm stuck. I'm stuck in the emotions that come with having been sexually abused twice as a child at the hands of a family member, once when I was 6 and again when I was 13. These emotions include shame, guilt, anxiety, depression, to be sure. However, there's also fear of success, fear of being seen, even though I know that's going to be a byproduct, and one of the tiny reasons I'm starting this podcast. There's always this other shoe on the precipice or falling off of it. There's always the fear that any joy or happiness I have, I'm either not worthy of it or it's going to be taken away. I'm pretty sure that comes from having been a pretty joyous or joyful child and then having that joy taken away by someone who was supposed to protect and love me, while simultaneously taking away my right to choose who I gave my innocence to. I was watching a documentary just last night, actually, called Spacey Unmasked. It was about the men who weren't a part of the trial where Kevin Spacey was acquitted of sexually abusing a young man. And they were sharing their stories of alleged sexual abuse and or harassment at the hands of Kevin Spacey. That saddens me. I really enjoyed his work. I thought he was an amazing actor. But he has some demons he needs to do battle with. This one gentleman, anyway, was an ex-Marine who was trying to make it in the entertainment industry. And he was sharing one of these instances, and he started to cry. He got up and he walked away from the camera. I think he even walked off camera, and he was still mic'd. And we can hear him say that it's the one thing he didn't want to do. Break down on camera. And he apologizes for it. And I felt sorry for him, just like I feel sorry for women who share their trauma on camera and can't get through it without being emotional. And I wish they wouldn't apologize for it. I mean, there are content creators that have vlogs, and some of what they share about their day or their life makes them cry. People need to stop apologizing for crying. That's something we do, something we're built to do, or else we wouldn't have tear ducts. But we need to stop apologizing for stuff like that, for anything, for being emotional. Of course, I felt sorry for him too because of what happened to him. But because he's a man, he viewed his tears as his victimization. He didn't even give himself the space to consider himself a survivor. Many of these men consider themselves victims. And I know it's tied up in all that toxic masculinity that the patriarchy likes to throw around all the damn time. But they're not victims any more than women and children who have been sexually abused. It's my humble opinion that we're only victims of these heinous acts if they end in our murders. If it doesn't, then we're fucking survivors. Just as we refer to those that go on to live past any devastating moment in their lives. As a survivor of sexual, physical, and mental abuse, women have an extremely difficult time sharing their stories with anyone. Will we be believed? Will we receive justice? Why are we the ones who feel shame and guilt for something that wasn't our fault? And I'm more than 99% sure that it's even worse for men, because they're supposed to be strong, right? We're the weaker sex, not them. You're right, sure. There are little to no safe spaces for all of us, the survivors of predatory and violent people. I mean, think about it. Here in Colorado, for example, domestic violence isn't even considered an independent crime, but as a sentencing enhancement or aggravator. And if the independent crime is dismissed, so is the domestic violence enhancement. They won't even punish people for trying to hurt, maim, and or kill each other in Colorado. They have to have had committed another crime for them to add that onto that. There are higher sentences for cannabis possession in some states than sexual abuse or domestic violence against children or a partner that doesn't end in their murders. Anytime a survivor wants to seek justice for their SA or DV assaults, I can hear the doubts running through the minds of the masses, the mob, especially if the alleged abuser is famous, wealthy, or in politics. The accuser is almost always looking for a payday or attention or clicks or whatever. That's not to say regular people don't face the same skepticism and that our journeys to get justice isn't just as obstacle laden. Geez, people fake their deaths, yet those who are missing and presumed dead don't face anywhere near the same amount of skepticism a survivor of abuse does. I know that's an extreme comparison, but consider how many people have been convicted of murder and the prosecution hadn't even found a body. So with all that to correct, is it really any wonder that there are little to no safe spaces in real life or virtually, and that it's really up to us, the survivors, to create and maintain them in whatever form that takes? That is the main reason for me to create this podcast. A place for survivors to gather, that's in quotes, to help each other speak our truth, and or for it to be okay with not sharing it, to be believed, to be heard, to get that nudge toward the baby steps that are our own individual healing journeys, and for their loved ones to listen without judgment, without expectation, with love and compassion and understanding, especially if they're hearing it for the first time within this space and not during a one-on-one conversation. For some survivors, it's easier to share virtually than in real life. And our supporters need to be okay with that. I'm not sure exactly what form this safe space will take or how we'll even get together to share not just our trauma, but anything else we want to talk about. I've already set up an email address to gather my listeners Notice my complete and total confidence that I'll gain some. My listeners' stories, thoughts, opinions, and suggestions to make our space safe and inclusive, and also kind. That email address is S.I.M.M. Step inside my mind at gmail.com. Now that I've made this lump of clay that is this podcast less lumpy, I want to close this episode out with a few thoughts I've had since making YouTube a major source of entertainment. I had to do that because when we moved from the East Coast here to Colorado, we didn't have live television, so it was YouTube. This section of any episode where I include the section, yeah, I'm a total amateur professional. Anyway, I'm going to call this section Gear Grinders, and this one is about YouTube paranormal videos whose titles state, "Don't watch this alone." Well, I'm alone much of the time, and I'll hazard a guess that many other introverts, if they're lucky enough to have people in their lives that allow them the space to be alone without taking it personally in a, well, if you're not going to keep in touch with me as much as I keep in touch with you, so I'm ghosting you attitude, are alone. Seems to me these paranormal content creators are missing out on an entire demographic by telling us not to watch these videos alone. Just a thought. Also, do blind people utilize YouTube? I'm not trying to be funny or mean. This is a serious question, and I want to know. And the only reason I'm asking is because it's the only reason I can come up with to explain why some paranormal top 5, 10, 50 scary video content creators feel the need to describe either before or after the video plays what we see. Play by play. It's the only reason I can come up for that. It's because blind people watch it. I mean, it can't possibly be because they're using redundant narration as filler instead of researching new content to include in their lists, right? Nah, couldn't be that. Anywho, if someone could give me a logical explanation for that trend, it would be very much appreciated. And if you've received anything positive from listening to this, pay it forward. Peace, love, and hair grease.
I see miserable people doing things they hate just to fit in. I know it's easier to get along peacefully, but have you ever thought about you? Don't know why I keep on doing what I'm told to do when the rules are made up by someone we never knew. Baby, wipe your tears and hear me out. We don't need someone to feel alright. Let's do the streets on Monday. Let's call your exes and tell them they can join us too.
Thank you for listening. I hope our time spent inside my mind was, at the very least, amusing. At the most, positive-ish, and conducive to whatever you were in search of when you chose to listen. Thank you, from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head, for joining me on my journey. If you're new to this space, welcome. Pay it forward, lift, and place someone else on their path to their best selves. Be kind, be generous, make a dent, and get into as much good trouble as possible. Do you, be you, doobie doobie doo.